Thank you. All right, thank you everyone for sticking around to watch the last presentation of the day. It is happening a little bit earlier than most conferences, which is awesome. And I hope everyone is going to be at the after party tonight as well. All right, my name is Vays. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about myself. I do want to get into the presentation and try to explain Bitcoin. And even though it's been around for 13 years now, it is still a little hard for everyone to grasp what it is, why it's important in all fields, especially in the field of marketing. I did spend about 10 years on Wall Street, companies like Bear Stearns, JP Morgan. I organize a couple of events, used to be 3, now I'm down to 2. One is Unconfiscatable, which is an event centered around Bitcoin and just educating and explaining it. The other one is the Financial Summit, which is for traders, hedge funds, VCs. It's like a 5-night networking retreat at exotic destinations. You can find me all over social media, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Everything is the username Vays, no spaces. Please watch out for imposters and fake accounts. I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with what's going on there. So real quick. So Bitcoin is starting to change the world because for the first time in human history, we have an unconfiscatable, censorship-resistant means of savings and payments. And it's great that I was able to get unconfiscatable.com because the word did not exist in the English dictionary, the English language, and it still doesn't. Because we've never had the concept of unconfiscatability. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, you guys will understand how powerful that is and why Bitcoin is unique. Bitcoin is as unique from anything that came before Bitcoin, meaning any, since the internet. It's probably the greatest innovation in technology since the internet itself. While everything that has come after Bitcoin's existence has actually not innovated in any way like Bitcoin did. So Bitcoin is as unique from anything that came before it as it is from anything that came after it, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's Solana, whether it's any of these other blockchains. And so just a quick summary, Bitcoin is a pretty simple global payment rail. And it creates a new pool of wealthy users and clients. So just like the internet created a new wave of the next set of wealthy people, the wealthiest people today, you know, we're looking at guys like Mark Zuckerberg, people like Bill Gates, though he did start slightly before the internet. Also people like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. I mean, these are the people that made their wealth thanks to the internet. And the next wave of the wealthiest people will be the people that come from the crypto and the Bitcoin space. The first trillionaire will likely to be someone with a lot of Bitcoin. It's just the next wave of evolution. And also, again, this is a combination. This is the true financial technology. Like when people say fintech, to me, fintech is Bitcoin. That's it. That's the list. That's fintech. That's the ultimate combination of finance, money, with the latest technology. And that latest technology is basically the fact that Bitcoin is decentralized. And that's what makes it so unique, while no other asset in the crypto space is actually decentralized. They will claim they're decentralized. They will write a paper. They will go on TV. They will talk about how decentralized they are until there is a hack and either the project dies or there is a hack that they need to fix, which means 20 people will get on a phone call and it will get magically fixed. So they will prove how not decentralized they are when the situation comes up. For Bitcoin, that is incredibly challenging because there is no CEO, there is no central point of failure, and that's good and bad. That means there's nobody to call if something goes wrong. So there's two ways in, there's two things to really understand when it comes to Bitcoin. One is why you should care about it, why you should have some, why it's a good idea to use it. And the other one is how to actually get involved, how to acquire your first Bitcoin, how to make a transaction, how to protect your Bitcoin. Because the beauty about being an unconfiscatable asset is that while no one can take it away from you, you are now the bank. You are now your own bank, and you are fully responsible for it. So you have to understand how to use the technology. This presentation is going to focus on the first part, why you should care and why it's important. I used to have even a conference called Understanding Bitcoin where we used to teach the how. That's not really my specialty, but a good friend of mine named BTC Sessions has an incredible YouTube channel that teaches people how to use it. So I outsource that to him, and I try to explain to people why. So, let me go back. So this is basically the price history of Bitcoin, and I just grabbed a couple of books that could be interesting. By the way, presentation similar to this is online. If you go to my YouTube channel and you click on a playlist for presentations, you will find more interactive presentations. I like to use Prezi for my presentations, so you'll find it in my presentation section. Also, if you Google my name and the word Prezi, which is the presentation software, you can find this presentation for free over there as well, just the slides. But my slides are all pictures, and I just talk about what the pictures represent. So these are some of the good books, and this is the entire price history of Bitcoin up to today. We're going through a little bit of a bear market. Not the first one, not going to be the last one either, and I obviously expect it to make new highs. So, for me personally, the most important property of Bitcoin is unconfiscatability. And we have had several critical examples. Well, there have been infinite number of examples throughout history. But let's talk about the examples that help Bitcoin since its launch. What I heard about Bitcoin as far back as 2010, but it wasn't interesting to me until 2013 with the events in Cyprus in 2013. Anyone remembers what happened in Cyprus in 2013? We got 2 hands went up, maybe 3. So in 2013, Cyprus, which is a European nation, it's on the euro. It is obviously a developed country, like any other European country, or Canada, America, Australia. They decided to shut down the banks and confiscate 50% of people's money in the bank beyond 100,000 euro. And they didn't care how you earned that money. Legally, illegally, it didn't matter. They bailed the banks in. So if you had a nice job and you were saving for a house and you saved 200,000 euro, 50,000 euro was taken from the bank, from your bank account, just because they wanted to. If you saved 500,000 and you were about to launch a business, you lost 200,000 euro. Just gone, just taken from your bank, okay? And this didn't make all that much news around the world because obviously they don't want people knowing. They're just gonna take your money out of the bank account. Another example is right here. This is the last statistic I could find. The US wrote an article, but then I couldn't find any more. In 2014, according to the US government, wrong slide. According to the US government, law enforcement confiscated more money from people than criminals stolen from people that year, okay? So it's not the criminals you have to worry about coming to your house and stealing your wealth. It's called civil asset forfeiture, and I don't know if you guys can see that little cartoon right there where one cop says to the other cop, "We're still short on cash for the project," and the other guy goes, "That guy looks guilty of something." So that's basically what's happening, is that because our money is so centralized and so controlled that well, the government and law enforcement and agencies basically can criminalize your money and take the money without you being actually accused of a crime. This was the article from 2013 on Cyprus. 2015, the Greek banking shutdown. Anyone remember that one? There you go. More hands are going up. And they shut down the banks. I had in my other presentations, I have a more detailed slide. They were allowing people to withdraw 20 euros a day for a few weeks, and then they started allowing people to withdraw 420 euros for the week. Everyone rushed to the banks. There was a bit of a bank run just to take out the 400 euro. And now we come to the more recent past, 2021. Right there, Justin Trudeau decides to freeze bank accounts of people protesting the COVID restrictions. The truckers' rally up in Canada, bank accounts were just frozen. And then in 2022, right after Russia invaded Ukraine, we had confiscation of private property, the freezing of bank accounts in the West of any wealthy Russians that happened to have assets outside of Russia. Those assets were frozen, confiscated. I should have posted it. There was some Russian billionaire had a yacht, like a mega yacht. I think it was one of the biggest in the world. And the German government, I think, confiscated it. And they have now spent over $13 million maintaining the yacht. So the German taxpayers have been paying for the maintenance of a yacht that they confiscated, $13 million. You got like 70 crew. The yacht costs like $500,000 a month to maintain. So that's a lot of these decisions haven't really been thought through. It's you don't really think these things through all the way of how exactly these Russian oligarchs are going to be able to do something about Putin when you took all their wealth away. All right, so for me, that's the most important property. The second most important property is censorship resistance. Bitcoin, not only does it provide you holding an unconfiscatable asset, it provides censorship resistance. So we have several examples of this as well. The first time Bitcoin ever came on a map was the 2010 WikiLeaks situation. Who here remembers WikiLeaks? Excellent, more hands are going up. So that was the first time Bitcoin was ever in the news. It was right there. It was in September of 2010. I found out about Bitcoin probably around this time. I don't remember if it was December of 2010 or soon after that, but this was the big story. WikiLeaks, the US government went to shut down WikiLeaks because they didn't like all the illegal activity that was being exposed that the US government was doing by Julian Assange, and they cut them off from all payments. And one of the developers of Bitcoin code suggested WikiLeaks needs to start using Bitcoin in order to get donations. Satoshi, the anonymous creator of Bitcoin, replied saying, no, this is not a good idea. Bitcoin is still too young, too fragile, still at risk of collapsing, and we don't really need this kind of attention. But about 6 months later, WikiLeaks had no choice, and they started accepting Bitcoin. And that was the first use case for Bitcoin. So the first use case wasn't it being an unconfiscatable asset, because it wasn't worth anything. The first use case was actually using it as a censorship-resistant payment. It was a payment that just cannot be stopped. Bitcoin is not always fast. It's pretty fast. It's not always cheap, even though it's pretty cheap. It's not always private, even though you can use tools to make it private. But when you send it from your possession to someone else's possession, you will lose that digital data, and it will get to where it's going. And there is nothing any government can do about it. They just can't. And that is a very powerful tool to pay people around the world, to find employees around the world, without worrying about these censorship-controlled payments. 2011, 1 year later, we had Silk Road. So Silk Road was a marketplace for lots of products that some countries considered to be illegal. Most of the things that were bought and sold on Silk Road were drugs, but again, they're not illegal everywhere. Like Portugal pretty much has legalized all drugs. In Amsterdam, not everything is legal, but most. But in some countries, everything is pretty much illegal. At the time, marijuana was illegal pretty much everywhere in the U.S. Now it's about to be legal pretty much everywhere in the U.S. So laws change, and that provided a marketplace for some of the things. Now, Bitcoin is unconfiscatable, but only if you properly protect it. When Silk Road was shut, when the website was shut down by the U.S. authorities, the Bitcoin was not properly protected, and the government was able to confiscate 144,000 Bitcoin, but they didn't believe in the long-term prospects of Bitcoin, so they sold it for $48 million, even though in today's dollars, this would be about $3 billion today. And at the top of the market, it was about $12 billion. So yes, it can be confiscated if you do not properly protect it or you let somebody else hold it. Now, as I talked about the Greek example wasn't just an example of unconfiscatability. It was also an example of censorship-resistant payment. And here is the article of that you were only allowed to withdraw 60 euros a day, then for 20 euros for the week. Everyone rushed to the banks the moment they were allowed to withdraw 420 euro for the week. So again, if you didn't have your money at the bank, they could not tell you you could only spend 60 euros a day. You will always have access to your, to a method of payment through the Bitcoin rails. So when the word Bitcoin is used, it is both the token, the Bitcoins, usually spelled with a lowercase b and plural. And then when people talk about Bitcoin, the network, usually using an uppercase B and in a singular term, so Bitcoin. Because you can't have Bitcoins on a different network. Like Bitcoin needed its own rails. If we compare that to the US dollar, we had the US dollar as the token, the SWIFT banking system is the payment rails. With Bitcoin, we call it Bitcoin and Bitcoin. And that's what can make it a little bit confusing. And this is also why you have these other networks like Ethereum and Ether, and everyone is building their own currencies and their own networks. And this is why I don't believe that there will be 1 billion different tokens on 1 billion different networks. Bitcoin was designed to create this one unique decentralized currency, because having 160 currencies around the world where any given year at least 3 of them are in hyperinflation, that's an inefficient world. But going to a world of 1 billion different tokens, I find less efficient than the world before Bitcoin. So this is why I focus on Bitcoin, and I believe Bitcoin will be that one payment token. And Bitcoin, the network, is going to be the one network that most projects are going to be utilizing if they need a decentralized platform, which Bitcoin is. Oh, and again, more recently, Russia got kicked off of SWIFT. Again, from a global perspective, I mean, I understand why the SWIFT system kicked off Russia. Obviously, everybody's angry what's happening. I am half Russian, half Ukrainian, by the way, in case people are wondering. So this is a real tragedy of what's going on. But by kicking Russia off the SWIFT network, that means that going forward, there will not be a single payment system in the world. Russia and China will build their own. China might have their own. They already have one. Russia will have their own. So there will be at least 3, potentially 2. But the world is changing, and this is good for Bitcoin because eventually everyone's going to be using one. The world doesn't get better by splitting things up. I think they're trying to kick Russia off the internet protocol, and now we're going to have multiple internet protocols. Again, that makes everything worse. If you want your website to be visible in Russia, you may have to build it on a completely different internet. This is not a more efficient world. This is going backwards, but hopefully Bitcoin can unite everything technologically. Okay, so 1/3 concept of Bitcoin. So those 2 properties were the most important. Because of those two properties, and the fact that those two properties will never change, the third property of Bitcoin is that there will only be 21 million Bitcoins. Okay? It was designed to be hard money, harder than gold. So money has always evolved. I don't believe the world is going back to gold. Gold was great until we had electricity, until we had modern banking, until we had the internet. No one is going to be handing each other pieces of gold unless we have no electricity, the internet's out, electricity's out, and then you have a much bigger problem than what money you're using. Okay, for starters, think about how many nuclear reactors there are in the world and what happens in a world with no electricity. Obviously, we're not going back to, as much as the ESG initiative wants you to start using candles and swimming over the Atlantic, that's not going to happen. We're not going to be using less energy. We will only be using more energy because the more energy we use, the better our life is. That has always been that way. And I don't believe we're going to start using less energy now. I mean, it's great that people are not going to be able to charge their electric cars because they got to save on energy, but that's a whole different presentation that I have. So we're not going, gold was great. That was the last innovation in money, was from gold to modern banking, digital banking, and now I believe the next stage is moving to Bitcoin. This is basically a generational shift. I don't believe Bitcoin is going anywhere for at least 100 years. The new world reserve currency usually changes every 100, 110 years. The US dollar has been in power for over 100 years, and within the next 10 to 15 years, it's running into its historical limit of how long a world reserve currency can be around. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you can't have an infinite number of digital scarcities. It's not digital scarcity. So there's either one digital scarcity or there isn't. When they say, well, Ethereum is going to have a limited number, and then another token is going to have a limited number, and then another token is going to have a limited number. Yeah, but there's infinite number of tokens. The one thing Bitcoin did is, when Satoshi solved this unsolvable computer science problem known as a double spending problem of how do you send digital data and lose possession of that data. Remember, we never had that before. Anytime you send a text message, anytime you send a picture, anytime you send a document, you're never losing possession of that document. The technological side of Bitcoin changed that. It allowed you to send digital data and lose possession of that data. That was done through the mining network, which is why Ethereum getting rid of mining is insane. That was the only innovation that was there in Ethereum, the fact that it was mineable. They removed the only innovative part of a blockchain that exists. I mean, the mining is what created Bitcoin. So to me, that's going backwards to the old system. And so I don't believe in having infinite number of digital scarcities. So this is digital scarcity, just like gold. Gold was confiscated in 1933 in the United States. I am a little concerned that something similar could happen to Bitcoin if too many people hold their Bitcoin with government-regulated institutions. No one has to hold their Bitcoin with government-regulated institutions. You can hold that Bitcoin yourself, where you're in total control. And again, they were not going to people's houses to collect their gold. People stored all their gold with banks, and they were able to easily confiscate that Bitcoin from banks. And in the 70s, the final link to gold was severed. A very good book I would recommend is The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. And in that book, he had a couple of lines. Bitcoin is the hardest money ever invented. Growth in its value cannot possibly increase its supply. It can only make the network more secure and immune to attack. And this makes Bitcoin fundamentally different from any other money. So more reasons why Bitcoin is likely to move forward. This is a giant list of hyperinflations in the last century. So this is since 1900, how many countries have had their currencies completely implode? This was a book written in 2008, so it stopped over there. It stopped right here. I first did this presentation about 4 years ago. I had to add all of these countries that have hit hyperinflation since 2008. I really need to update this. I need to add at least 5 or 6 countries to the list in the last 4 years. Venezuela is our latest one that is going through an insane hyperinflation. Hyperinflations are political events. They're not the result of too much money printing. It's basically when people lose faith in that currency. But regular inflation is bad. You're witnessing it here in Turkey. Like one of the side effects, how many of you tried to get a taxi around here or an Uber? So you know exactly what the problem is with what happens when your currency goes into hyperinflation and the government is refusing to allow taxis to raise prices. So here we are. Money printing is, of course, a problem. The US government printed 23% of all of the money in circulation when they decided to shut down the world for COVID. Again, an insane geopolitical move to destroy the global economy. I thought 2019 was one of the best years, just globally. Businesses, I know my businesses were doing great. How many of you had a business in 2019 and how well was it doing? And then you had to completely shut down, and then that got completely crushed in 2020 and barely recovering now. And we have, here's just a global map of many of the countries that are experiencing major inflation. You see Turkey, where we are right now at 60%, and that is, I believe, for the year so far this year, or as of April, so in the first quarter of the year. And Argentina is having a big problem, and many other countries as well. Russia started out the year really bad, but it has recovered a little bit. Europe, the UK is now going through a major problem with their currency devaluation. Okay, other big issues. So for me, these are the main reasons why fiat currencies